In the glittering heart of London, where fortunes are made and reputations are shattered with a single whisper, a simple choice can change everything. For Bella Vance, a girl with nothing but her pride, attending the season's most lavish ball was a desperate gamble. But when the cruel reality of her hunger sent her collapsing to the marble floor, she didn't just become the subject of scandal. She woke up in the arms of the one man no one dared to cross, the enigmatic Duke John Beaumont, a man whose dark past and cold demeanor hid secrets that could either save her or destroy them both. The gas lamps of Beaumont House cast a golden, almost holy glow upon the throngs of London's high society. Diamonds glittered like captive stars on the necks and wrists of women whose laughter tinkled like fine crystal, a sound as beautiful as it was brittle. For Bella Vance, clutching a borrowed dance card with fingers that trembled slightly, it was a world away from the cramped, cold room she called home. The invitation, a miracle secured by her late mother's distant cousin, Mrs. Gable, was her last hope. A single night to potentially secure a position as a governess or a companion. Anything to stave off the gnawing hunger that was a more constant companion than her own shadow. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in 2 days. The meager slice of bread she had had that morning was a distant memory, its substance long since burned away by the nervous energy coursing through her. She wore her mother's only remaining gown, a simple dress of deep blue silk, skillfully mended and altered to hide its age. It was elegant, but paled in comparison to the ostentatious finery surrounding her. She felt like a sparrow that had accidentally flown into a cage of peacocks. "Stand tall, Bella," Mrs. Gable had instructed, her voice a mixture of hope and anxiety. "Do not let them see your fear. A lady's bearing is her armor." But armor was heavy, and Bella was weak. The heat of the ballroom, thick with the scent of expensive perfume and beeswax, pressed in on her. The vibrant colors of the gowns and uniforms swam before her eyes, blurring into a dizzying kaleidoscope. She tried to focus on the conversations, the snippets of gossip and political maneuvering, but the words became a meaningless hum beneath the insistent, painful growl of her stomach. She saw Lady Isabella Montgomery, the season's acclaimed diamond, holding court near the grand staircase. Her laughter was sharp and cruel as she gestured dismissively toward a young debutante whose dress was deemed last season's fashion. Bella instinctively shrank back, hoping to remain invisible. Her mission was to approach Lady Danbury, a formidable dowager known for her extensive connections and her need for a new reader. Bella had rehearsed her speech 100 times, a delicate balance of deference and intelligence. But every time she saw an opening, her courage failed her. The aristocrats seemed like a different species, their confidence an impenetrable fortress. They looked through her, their eyes gliding past her simple gown and pale face as if she were part of the drapery. An hour bled into 2. The orchestra swelled, playing a lively waltz that sent couples spinning across the polished floor. The dizzying motion only worsened her lightheadedness. Black spots began to dance at the edge of her vision. She knew she had to get some air, to escape the suffocating heat before she made a scene. Humiliation was a luxury she could not afford. She began to thread her way toward the French doors that led to the terrace, her movements slow and unsteady. Each step felt like wading through thick molasses. The room tilted violently, the music warping into a discordant clang. The face of a stern-looking lord swam into her view, his expression a mask of disapproval. Was he looking at her? Did he know she didn't belong? A wave of cold dread washed over her, followed by a searing heat. She reached out a hand to steady herself against a marble column, but her fingers brushed against empty air. The collective gasp of the crowd was the last thing she heard, a distant, muffled sound like the rush of the sea. Then, the world dissolved into blackness. The gilded cage had finally claimed its sparrow. The last sensation she registered before consciousness fled entirely was not the cold, hard impact of the floor, but the impossible feeling of being caught by strong, unyielding arms. A soft, rhythmic ticking was the first thing to penetrate the fog. It was a gentle, grounding sound, unlike the chaotic noise of the London streets she was used to. The next sensation was comfort. She was lying on something impossibly soft, a feather bed, perhaps, covered by a blanket woven from what felt like pure warmth. The air smelled of old leather, wood smoke, and something else, a faint, masculine scent of bergamot and sandalwood. It was a scent of quiet power. Bella's eyelids fluttered open. She wasn't in her cold, sparse room. She was in a magnificent bedchamber, dominated by a four-poster bed draped in heavy, forest green velvet. A low fire crackled in a grand marble fireplace across the room, its flames dancing and casting flickering shadows on walls lined with books from floor to ceiling. This was a library, or a study perhaps, converted into a place of rest. It was a room of substance, of quiet contemplation, a stark contrast to the glittering frivolity of the ballroom. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through her. Where was she? What had happened? The memory returned in a sickening rush. The dizziness, the staring eyes, the fall. She had fainted, in the middle of the most important ball of the season. A hot flush of shame burned her cheeks. She had ruined everything. "It is best you do not move too quickly." The voice was deep and calm, with a resonant timbre that seemed to vibrate in the very air of the room. It came from a high-backed leather armchair near the fire, which had been turned away from her. As she watched, the chair swiveled slowly, revealing its occupant. He was the last man she would have expected. Duke John Beaumont, the host of the ball, a man known throughout London as the Silent Duke. He was notoriously reclusive, rarely seen at social events, and when he was, his presence was a formidable, brooding cloud that silenced whispers and straightened spines. Stories about him were legion, that he was scarred from a war, that his heart was broken by a tragic loss, that he was cold and ruthless in his business dealings. Seeing him now, in the intimacy of his private study, Bella felt her breath catch. He was even more imposing than the rumors suggested. His dark hair had a slight wave, and his eyes, the color of a stormy sea, regarded her with an unnerving intensity. A faint silver scar traced a line from his left temple into his hairline, a stark contrast to his otherwise flawless, aristocratic features. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't frowning. His expression was one of cool, detached observation, as if she were a puzzle he was considering. "You fainted," he stated, his voice devoid of any discernible emotion. "My footman was about to catch you, but I was closer." So it had been his arms. The thought sent another, entirely different, flush through her. "Your Grace," she whispered, her voice hoarse. She tried to sit up, a gesture of respect, but a wave of dizziness forced her back against the plush pillows. "I said not to move," he repeated, though not unkindly. He rose from his chair, his height and broad shoulders seeming to shrink the grand room. He moved with a quiet, deliberate grace. "My physician, Dr. Miles, has already seen to you. He diagnosed it as a simple case of exhaustion and a lack of sustenance." He said the last words with a careful neutrality, but Bella felt them like a physical blow. He knew. He knew she had collapsed from hunger. The shame was so profound, it felt like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. Tears pricked at the back of her eyes, and she fought them back with every ounce of her remaining strength. She would not cry in front of him. I apologize, Your Grace," she managed, her gaze fixed on the intricate pattern of the duvet. "I have caused you a great inconvenience and created a most regrettable scene." "The scene was of little consequence to me," he replied, his tone still unreadable. He gestured to a small table beside the bed where a tray had been placed. On it sat a bowl of steaming broth, a small loaf of bread, and a glass of water. Dr. Miles prescribed this. He was quite insistent. Bella stared at the food, her stomach cramped with a painful, desperate longing. It was more than she had seen in days, yet her pride warred with her body's desperate need. To accept it felt like an admission of her complete and utter failure. As if sensing her internal conflict, the Duke spoke again, his voice a fraction softer. "There is no shame in need, miss." He paused, raising a dark eyebrow. "Vance," she supplied quietly. "Bella Vance." "Miss Vance," he acknowledged, the name sounding foreign and yet significant on his tongue. The shame lies with a society that allows it to exist amidst such grotesque excess. He gestured vaguely, as if indicating the opulent party still raging somewhere below them. His words surprised her. They were not the words of a dismissive aristocrat. They held a note of cynicism, of a bitterness that mirrored something deep within her own heart. For the first time, she dared to meet his gaze directly. His stormy eyes held hers, and in their depths she saw not pity, but something else. Understanding, perhaps, or maybe just a profound, weary knowledge of the world's cruelties. "Eat, Miss Vance," he said, his voice now a quiet command. "Then we will speak of what is to be done." The words held an air of finality, leaving no room for argument. Bella, weak and overwhelmed, finally relented. She reached for the spoon, her hand shaking, and brought the first taste of warm, life-giving broth to her lips. In the silent sanctum of the Duke, under his watchful gaze, she began to feel the first stirrings not of despair, but of a fragile, terrifying hope. The broth was rich and savory, warming her from the inside out. Bella ate slowly, deliberately, forcing herself not to devour the food like a starving animal, keenly aware of the Duke's silent presence. He had returned to his chair by the fire, picking up a leather-bound book, but not, she noticed, turning its pages. His attention was still on her, a palpable weight in the quiet room. When she had finished the broth and half of the bread, a measure of strength returned to her. The dizziness receded, replaced by a clarity that only sharpened her awareness of her precarious situation. She was an unknown, penniless woman in the private study of one of the most powerful and feared men in England. The scandal this could create. It would destroy what little reputation she had left. "Thank you, Your Grace," she said, her voice stronger now. "You have been most kind. I must not impose on your hospitality any longer. If you would have a maid show me to a servant's exit, I shall be on my way." John Beaumont closed his book with a soft thud. "And where precisely will you be going, Miss Vance? Back to a home with an empty larder?" His directness was like a splash of cold water. There was no artifice to him, no polite dancing around the unpleasant truth. "That is my concern, Your Grace," she replied, a touch of defiance coloring her tone. Her pride was the only thing she truly owned. "It became my concern when you collapsed in my ballroom," he countered, his gaze unwavering. "Do you think I am unaware of the whispers that must already be slithering through those rooms downstairs? A mysterious woman faints and is carried away by the Duke himself. Tongues will wag. By morning, Your name will be connected to mine in the most unsavory of ways." Bella's heart sank. He was right. She had not only embarrassed herself, she had inadvertently dragged this powerful man into the mire of gossip. "I am truly sorry, Your Grace. I never intended—" "Your intentions are irrelevant," he cut in, though not harshly. "What matters is perception. If you slip out of my house in the dead of night, it will only confirm the worst of their assumptions. It will look like a clandestine affair." "But what else am I to do?" she cried, her composure finally cracking. "My presence here is improper. It will ruin me." "It is less improper than you might think," he said, a curious light in his eyes. "You are here under my protection, as my guest who fell ill. Anyone who dares suggest otherwise will answer to me." The threat was unspoken, but hung in the air, heavy and absolute. "You will remain here tonight. In the morning, my carriage will take you home, in full view of anyone who might be watching. It is the only way to control the narrative." Bella stared at him, bewildered. Why was he doing this? Why would a man of his stature go to such lengths for a complete stranger, a nobody? It made no sense. Unless he wanted something. The thought was a cold knot in her stomach. Men of his class did not offer charity without expecting a price. As if reading her mind, a faint, cynical smile touched his lips for the first time. It did not reach his eyes. "Do not mistake this for altruism, Miss Vance. I have a vested interest in ensuring my household is not the subject of baseless, sordid gossip. My actions are entirely selfish, I assure you." His explanation, meant to put her at ease, somehow did the opposite. It deepened the mystery of him. A soft knock came at the door. At the Duke's command, an elderly woman in the severe black dress of a head housekeeper entered. She had sharp, intelligent eyes and a face etched with a lifetime of quiet observation. She curtsied deeply. "Mrs. Davies," the Duke said, "this is Miss Vance. She will be our guest tonight. Please prepare the rose room for her, and see that she has a suitable nightgown and whatever else she may require." Mrs. Davies's gaze flickered over Bella, her expression unreadable but professional. "Of course, Your Grace." There was no surprise, no judgment in her voice, but Bella felt herself being assessed and catalogued with an unnerving efficiency. "And Mrs. Davies," the Duke added, as the housekeeper was about to turn away, "Miss Vance is to be treated with the utmost respect. She is under my personal protection. Is that understood?" "Perfectly, Your Grace," the old woman replied, her eyes meeting his in a moment of silent communication. Bella had the distinct impression that this was not just an instruction, but a warning to the entire staff. Mrs. Davies turned her attention to Bella. "If you will come with me, miss." Her tone was polite, but there was a reserved quality to it, a wait-and-see attitude. Bella hesitated, looking back at the Duke. "Your Grace, My decision is final, Miss Vance," he said, reopening his book and effectively dismissing her. "We will speak again in the morning." Left with no choice, Bella slid off the bed, her legs still a little unsteady. Mrs. Davies offered a steadying arm, which Bella gratefully accepted. As she was led from the Duke's sanctum into the quiet, candle-lit hallway of the private wing, Mrs. Davies spoke, her voice low. "You should know, miss, that you are the first guest to stay in this wing since the late Duchess passed 5 years ago." The statement was delivered without inflection, a simple fact. But Bella heard the unspoken warning contained within it. She had stumbled into a place of memory and sorrow, the domain of a man whose heart was said to be locked away. And by being here, she had unwittingly picked the lock. The whispers downstairs would be nothing compared to the silent questions that now filled the very walls of Beaumont House. Bella awoke to the soft morning light filtering through rose-patterned curtains. For a disoriented moment, she wondered if the entire previous night had been a fever dream. But the luxurious softness of the mattress beneath her and the unfamiliar opulence of the room were undeniable proof. The Rose Room was a vision of feminine elegance, cream and gold furniture, delicate floral wallpaper, and a vanity table set with silver-backed brushes. It felt like a room frozen in time, lovingly maintained, but achingly empty. This must have been the late Duchess's room. The realization sent a strange shiver through her. A young maid, whose name was Mary, had already laid out a simple but clean day dress for her, one that must have belonged to a member of the staff, but was of good quality. It was a modest grey wool, a stark contrast to the silks of the previous night, but it felt more like her own skin. After dressing, she was led not to a grand dining hall, but to a small, sunlit breakfast room overlooking a beautiful winter garden. Duke John Beaumont was already there, seated at the table, reading a newspaper. He was dressed not in formal evening attire, but in a tailored riding coat and breeches, which somehow made him seem even more formidable and vital. He looked up as she entered, his grey eyes assessing her. "Good morning, Miss Vance," he said, folding his newspaper. "I trust you slept well." "I did, thank you, Your Grace." "The room is lovely." "It was my wife's," he stated, his voice flat, preempting her unspoken question. The abruptness of his admission was startling. He spoke of his late wife, the Duchess Annalise, as a simple fact, but a profound sadness shadowed his eyes for a fleeting moment before being shuttered away. "Please, sit. Eat." A lavish breakfast was spread on the table: eggs, ham, warm bread, jam, and a pot of steaming tea. The aroma was intoxicating. This time Bella did not hesitate. Remembering the Duke's pragmatic nature, she understood that to refuse would be an insult to his hospitality and a denial of her own need. They ate in silence for several minutes, a quiet that was not awkward but companionable. Bella found herself stealing glances at him, trying to reconcile the fearsome, silent Duke of rumour with the man who had shown her such unexpected, if detached, kindness. "I have been making some inquiries this morning," he said finally, setting down his cup. "About you." Bella's fork clattered softly against her plate. "Your Grace?" "It was not difficult," he continued, unfazed by her alarm. "Bella Vance, daughter of Captain Thomas Vance of the 95th Rifles, who died at Waterloo. Your mother, a respectable clergyman's daughter, passed away 6 months ago from influenza, leaving you with little more than her good name. You have been scraping by, selling off what few possessions you had left, trying to find a respectable position. Your cousin, Mrs. Gable, procured your invitation to my ball in a last-ditch effort to help you." He recited the bleak facts of her life, as if reading a report. Bella felt completely exposed, her private struggles laid bare. "How did you—" "I employ men who are very good at finding things out," he said simply. "It is a necessary precaution when one allows a stranger to sleep under one's roof." His logic was cold but irrefutable. "It also tells me that you are in a rather desperate situation." "I am resourceful," she retorted, lifting her chin. "I will find a way." "Perhaps," he conceded, "or you will end up on the street, or worse." He paused, his gaze intensifying. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Vance." Bella's heart began to beat faster. Here it was. The price. "A proposition? Do not look so alarmed. It is a perfectly respectable one. I am in need of a librarian and a curator for my family's archives. My late father was a collector of rare books, and historical documents, and they have been left in a state of disarray for years. The work requires a keen mind, a steady hand, and a fluency in both Latin and French. Your mother's letters to Mrs. Gable, which my man also procured, speak highly of the education your father gave you. He knew about her languages. He had investigated every corner of her life. The extent of his reach was terrifying. "You want to employ me?" she asked, bewildered. "Precisely. You would reside here, at Beaumont House. You would be given a comfortable salary, a suite of rooms in the East Wing, and full access to the library. Your duties would be to catalogue, translate, and organize the collection. It is a significant undertaking that will take years." It was an unbelievable offer, a lifeline so far beyond her wildest dreams that it seemed impossible. A home, a salary, meaningful work that would use her education. But why? "Why me, Your Grace?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You could have your pick of scholars from Oxford or Cambridge." "Because a scholar from Oxford would come with his own ambitions and connections," the Duke replied, his expression turning shrewd. "You, Miss Vance, have none. You are intelligent, educated, and beholden to no one. You owe me your gratitude, which I find is a more reliable guarantee of loyalty than a fat purse. Furthermore, your presence here, in a formal, public position, will be the perfect way to silence the gossip from last night. It will transform the narrative from a potential scandal into an act of ducal benevolence. A bright young woman, fallen on hard times, rescued and given respectable employment by a generous benefactor." He had thought of everything, every angle, every consequence. His offer was not born of kindness, but of cold, hard pragmatism. He was solving her problem and his own in a single, calculated move. It was brilliant. It was ruthless, and it was an offer she could not possibly refuse. I accept, Your Grace," she said, her mind reeling. "Excellent," he said, with a nod of finality. "We will have my solicitor, Mr. Thompson, draw up a contract today. Your employment begins immediately." He stood up, his breakfast finished. "I have business to attend to. Mrs. Davies will show you to your new rooms. Welcome to Beaumont House, Miss Vance." With that, he turned and left the room, leaving Bella sitting amidst the remnants of a feast, her world irrevocably and terrifyingly changed. She had come to the ball seeking a small, safe harbour, and had instead been swept into the orbit of a man as deep and dangerous as the ocean itself. The East Wing of Beaumont House was a world away from the opulent, public-facing rooms and the sombre, masculine domain of the Duke's study. The suite assigned to Bella was spacious and filled with light, comprising a sitting room, a bedroom, and a small dressing room. The furniture was elegant but comfortable, and the windows overlooked the sprawling gardens. It was more luxury than she had ever known, yet it felt like a gilded cage, albeit a much larger one. Mrs. Davies ensured she was settled, her manner still professional and distant, though Bella detected a flicker of something, pity, perhaps, or curiosity, in the older woman's eyes. Her first week was a blur of solitude and study. The library was her sanctuary and her prison. It was a magnificent, two-story rotunda, filled with thousands upon thousands of books and scrolls. The air was thick with the scent of aging paper and leather. Duke John had been correct. The collection was in chaos. Dust-covered crates of unsorted documents sat in corners, and books were shelved with no discernible system. For Bella, who had always found solace in the quiet order of literature, it was a daunting but exhilarating challenge. She began by tackling her late father-in-law's personal correspondence. It was there, amidst letters discussing politics and land acquisitions, that she found the first clue that not all was as it seemed. She discovered a series of letters from a Mr. Daniel Larkin, a solicitor from a small town in Wiltshire, written 20 years prior. The letters were cryptic, speaking of a delicate matter, a wardship, and a great injustice. The final letter was chilling. In it, Mr. Larkin wrote, "I must insist, Your Grace. The girl's patrimony cannot be denied. To hide her away is a sin that will one day find you out. Her mother's family, the Ashworths, may have been disgraced, but the child is innocent." The old Duke's reply was not in the file. Ashworth. The name was unfamiliar to Bella, but the tone of the letter sent a shiver down her spine. A hidden child? A denied inheritance? It was a story straight out of a Gothic novel. The Duke himself remained a distant, almost spectral figure. He would occasionally appear in the library late at night, long after the staff had retired, to select a book. He would nod to her, a silent acknowledgement of her presence, but he never initiated conversation about her work. His brooding quietness was a constant, unnerving presence in the house. Bella felt as though she were a ghost in his home, and he, the master of shadows. Her quiet existence was shattered 2 weeks after her arrival. A formal dinner was being held at Beaumont House, a political necessity the Duke clearly despised but could not avoid. He informed Bella, via a note delivered by a footman, that she was expected to attend. "To solidify your position in the household," the note read. "It is time to face the vipers." Dressed in another gown provided by the Duke's household, a simple but elegant gown of emerald green that brought out the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes, Bella felt her old anxieties return. As she descended the grand staircase, she saw that the ballroom was once again filled with the cream of society. This time, however, when she entered, a hush fell over the room. Every eye turned to her. She was no longer an invisible sparrow. She was the Duke's librarian, a subject of intense speculation and gossip. She felt a hand on her elbow and turned to see the Duke at her side. "Courage, Miss Vance," he murmured, his voice so low only she could hear it. "Show them nothing." His presence was like a shield. The whispers continued, but no one dared approach her directly while she was at his side. The serpent, however, did not need to be so direct. Lady Isabella Montgomery, looking resplendent in a gown of shimmering gold, glided toward them, her smile as sharp as glass. "Your Grace," she purred, her eyes flicking dismissively over Bella. "And this must be the little charity case we have heard so much about. How wonderful of you to find a use for her. Does she dust the books or merely read them?" The insult was deliberate, designed to humiliate Ailette and remind her of her place. Before Bella could form a response, the Duke's grip on her arm tightened almost imperceptibly. "Miss Vance is a respected scholar in my employ, Isabella," John said, his voice dangerously soft. "Her intellect far surpasses the simple task of dusting. I would have thought you, of all people, would appreciate a sharp mind. It is, after all, such a novelty in your circle." Lady Isabella's smile faltered, a flicker of anger in her eyes. It was a direct hit. She was known for her beauty, not her brains. She recovered quickly, her lips curling into a venomous smile aimed at Bella. "Of course. One must have a hobby. Some men collect art, others collect strays. Do be careful, Miss Vance. The Duke has a history of growing tired of his acquisitions." She let the comment hang in the air, a clear and malicious allusion to the late Duchess. This time, Bella found her voice. "And some women collect rumours, Lady Isabella," she said, her tone steady and clear, surprising even herself. "I find books to be far more reliable. They have substance." A collective, barely audible gasp rippled through those nearest them. Lady Isabella's face, for a moment, was a mask of pure fury. No one, least of all a charity case, spoke to her that way. The Duke's lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "It seems Miss Vance is more than capable of defending herself," he said coolly. "Now, if you will excuse us. I believe the Prime Minister is trying to catch my eye." He steered Bella away, leaving a fuming Lady Isabella in their wake. As they moved through the crowd, Bella's heart was hammering against her ribs. She had made a powerful enemy. "That was unwise," John murmured, as they reached a quieter corner of the room. "She was insulting you, Your Grace," Bella defended herself. "And your late wife." He stopped and turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "My late wife is beyond the reach of her petty cruelties. You, however, are not. Isabella is not a woman to be trifled with. She has wanted to be the next Duchess of Beaumont since Annalise died. She sees you as an obstacle, no matter how insignificant." "An obstacle to what?" Bella asked, confused. "I am your librarian." "To her, you are a woman living under my roof, under my protection," he said, his gaze intense. "In her mind, that makes you her rival. Be on your guard, Miss Vance. The serpent has been alerted to your presence in the garden. She will bite." The warning was stark, and Bella knew he was right. She had survived hunger and poverty, but she was now facing a new kind of danger. The polished, glittering world of the aristocracy had its own predators, and she had just bared her teeth at the most venomous one of all. The aftermath of the dinner party settled into a quiet, simmering tension within Beaumont House. Lady Isabella's displeasure manifested not in a direct confrontation, but in a series of subtle social stings. Invitations Bella might have received as the Duke's protégé never arrived. Shopkeepers who had once been polite became suddenly cool. Whispers followed her whenever she dared to venture out. It was a war of 1,000 paper cuts, designed to isolate and undermine her. Yet, within the walls of the estate, something shifted. The Duke, who had once been a distant figure, began to seek her out more often. He would appear in the library in the evenings, not just to fetch a book, but to sit by the fire, watching her work. Sometimes he would ask about her progress with the archives, his questions sharp and insightful. At other times, they would sit in a comfortable silence, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the rustle of turning pages. During one of these evenings, Bella was poring over a dusty land survey from Wiltshire when she found it. Tucked within the folded parchment was a small, pressed flower, a dried sprig of edelweiss, and a miniature portrait, no bigger than her thumb. It was of a young woman with laughing eyes and a cascade of dark, wavy hair. On the back, in faint, elegant script, was a single word: Annalise. Bella gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. It was the late Duchess. She looked so young, so full of life. It was a stark contrast to the severe, formal portrait that hung in the grand gallery. "What have you found?" The Duke's voice, directly behind her, made her jump. He had approached without a sound. She turned, the miniature still in her hand. "Your Grace, I apologize. I found this tucked inside a survey. I didn't mean to pry." He looked down at the tiny portrait, and for the first time, Bella saw the armor around his heart crack. The cool, detached mask fell away, replaced by an expression of such profound, raw grief that it stole her breath. He reached out and took the miniature from her, his fingers brushing against hers. A strange jolt, like lightning, passed between them at the brief contact. "I thought this was lost," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. He stared at the face of his late wife, lost to the world, to a memory only he could see. She loved the mountains, We went to the Alps for our honeymoon. She found this flower on a high peak and said it was a symbol of our love, rare and resilient. He sank into the chair opposite Bella's desk, the miniature cradled in his large hand. She was nothing like them, he said, his voice low and bitter, gesturing vaguely toward the world beyond the library's walls. She didn't care for titles or jewels. She loved books and horses and walking in the rain. She was light. And this house, this life, it suffocated her. Bella sat down slowly, her heart aching for him. This was the source of his pain, the ghost that haunted every room of the grand house. "What happened to her, Your Grace?" she asked gently. He was silent for a long moment, his thumb stroking the smooth surface of the portrait. "There was a riding accident," he said, his voice hollow. "They said her horse was spooked. She was thrown. It was instant." He looked up, and his eyes were filled with a darkness that chilled her to the bone. "I was away, in Scotland. By the time I returned, she was gone." The official story. But his tone suggested something more, a doubt that had festered for years. "I never believed it was an accident," he confessed, the words torn from him. "Annalise was the finest horsewoman I have ever known. She could handle any mount. The horse she was riding that day was a gentle mare she had raised from a foal. It made no sense." He paused, his jaw tight. "The groom who was with her, a man named Jacob, disappeared the day after the accident. The local magistrate ruled it an unfortunate tragedy. The matter was closed. But I know someone was responsible." His hands clenched into fists. "I have spent 5 years searching for the truth, for Jacob, for any clue. I have found nothing. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and vulnerable. He had shared with her his deepest wound, a secret he had likely never spoken aloud to another soul. He had trusted her." "And Lady Isabella?" Bella dared to ask. "She was her friend." A humorless, bitter laugh escaped John's lips. Isabella was Annalise's cousin. She despised her. She was jealous of everything Annalise had. The title, the fortune, me. She was here, at Beaumont House, the week it happened. The implication was horrifying. Bella looked from the grieving man before her to the letters from Mr. Larkin she had hidden in her desk, the ones about a hidden child and a great injustice. A terrible, fragmented idea began to form in her mind. A disgraced family, the Ashworths, a bitter, jealous cousin, a mysterious death. It felt like separate threads of a single, dark tapestry. "Your Grace," Bella said, her voice trembling slightly. "In my research, I have found some things. Letters. Concerning your father and a family named Ashworth." John looked up, his grief momentarily overshadowed by a sharp, sudden interest. The mention of the name clearly meant something to him. "Ashworth?" he repeated, his eyes narrowing. "That was my wife's mother's maiden name. Her family was disowned by my grandfather, for reasons my father would never speak of." What did the letters say? Bella took a deep breath. She was stepping onto dangerous ground, meddling in secrets that had been buried for a generation. But looking at the pain in the Duke's eyes, she knew she had no choice. "They speak of a child, Your Grace, a girl, and an inheritance that was denied." John Beaumont went very still. The crack in his armor had widened, and through it, Bella could see not just a grieving husband, but a man on the verge of uncovering a truth far more devastating than he had ever imagined. The ghosts of Beaumont House were beginning to speak, and she was the only one who could hear them. The revelation in the library changed everything. The unspoken contract between them shifted from employer and employee to that of allies, bound by a shared search for the truth. The atmosphere in Beaumont House grew thick with secrets. Bella and John spent their evenings huddled together over dusty ledgers and cryptic letters, piecing together a puzzle that had been fragmented for over 2 decades. John, energized by a new lead after years of dead ends, dispatched his investigators with a renewed sense of purpose. Their targets were twofold: to find any living relative of the solicitor, Daniel Larkin, and to trace the history of the Ashworth family, specifically any records of a female child born around 21 years ago. Meanwhile, Bella's work in the archives took on a frantic urgency. She felt she was in a race against an unknown clock. She learned that the Ashworths had once been a wealthy family, rivals to the Beaumonts in both land and influence. The patriarch, Lord Ashworth, had a daughter, Eleanor, the same name as Bella's own mother, who had been secretly engaged to John's uncle, a man who died young in a supposed hunting accident. After his death, the Ashworth family fortunes mysteriously collapsed, and they vanished from society. It was whispered that John's grandfather had orchestrated their ruin. One afternoon, while searching through a box of the late Duchess Annalise's personal effects, things John had never been able to bring himself to look at, Bella found a small, locked diary. There was no key. Driven by a powerful intuition, she remembered a small, ornate silver locket she often wore, the only possession she had left of her mother's. On a whim, she tried the tiny key that opened it. It fit. Her hands trembled as she opened the diary. The pages were filled with Annalise's elegant, looping script. Much of it was the day-to-day musings of a young duchess, but as Bella read on, the entries grew darker. October 10th. Isabella visited again today. The way she looks at John, it is like she is starving, and he is a feast. She speaks of me as if I am a temporary placeholder. She said something strange today, about how some families have secrets that can destroy them from within. I feel a chill whenever she is near. November 2nd. I have been going through my mother's old papers. I found a letter, a confession. My grandfather did not simply ruin the Ashworths, he stole from them. There was another heir, a child, my mother's cousin. She was hidden away to protect her from him. The letter says the proof is in a trust deposit box at Thompson & Sons, John's own solicitors. November 15th. I confronted John's father. He denied everything, but I saw the fear in his eyes. He warned me to let sleeping dogs lie, that some truths are too dangerous. He spoke of my own family's tainted blood. What did he mean? The final entry was dated the day before her death. November 28th. I know the truth. Isabella found out. She cornered me in the stables. She knows about the Ashworth heir. She said that if John ever found out the truth of what his family did, he would be honor-bound to restore the Ashworth fortune, which would mean relinquishing half of the Beaumont assets she considers rightfully hers. She looked mad. She told me I had a choice: keep my mouth shut, or she would silence me for good. I am meeting Jacob by the old oak tomorrow. We are going to ride for the magistrate. I must tell someone. I fear for my life. Bella felt sick. It wasn't an accident. It was murder. Isabella had arranged for Annalise to be silenced to protect her own potential inheritance. Jacob, the groom, hadn't fled out of guilt. He had fled for his life. She ran, diary in hand, to find John. He was in his study, pacing like a caged tiger. One of his investigators had just returned. "We found him, Your Grace," the investigator, a grim-faced man named Mr. Jones, was saying. "The solicitor, Larkin. He passed away years ago. But his son runs the practice now. He remembers his father speaking of the case. A child, a girl, given up to an orphanage in London after her mother, Eleanor Ashworth, died in childbirth. The child was later adopted by a military man, a Captain Thomas Vance. The world tilted on its axis. Bella felt the blood drain from her face. Eleanor Ashworth, her mother's name. Captain Vance, her father. John turned and saw her pale, shocked face, the diary clutched in her hand. "Bella? What is it?" His use of her first name was unconscious, intimate. "The Ashworth heir," she whispered, her voice a reedy thread. "It's me." She handed him the diary. He read the final, damning entry, his face hardening into a mask of cold, terrifying fury. The grief he had carried for 5 years was instantly consumed by a white-hot rage. He finally knew the name of his wife's murderer, and he finally understood the shocking truth of Bella's identity. She was not just his librarian. She was the rightful heir to half of his fortune. She was Annalise's long-lost cousin, the very person his wife had died trying to protect. "Jones," John said, his voice lethally calm. "Find me Jacob. Find out where he has been hiding for the last 5 years, and send a message to my solicitor. Tell Mr. Thompson I will be there in 1 hour. We have a trust box to open." He looked at Bella, his stormy eyes filled with a whirlwind of emotions, rage, guilt, and a fierce, burgeoning protectiveness. "Isabella will not get away with this," he vowed. "I will see her hang for what she did to Annalise. And I will see that you have everything that was stolen from you." The threads had unraveled, revealing a pattern of greed and murder that stretched back for generations. The quiet librarian and the silent duke were no longer just searching for answers. They were preparing for war. John Beaumont moved with the chilling precision of a striking cobra. Within a week, the pieces were in place. Mr. Thompson, the solicitor, confirmed the existence of the trust box. Opened with a key John found amongst his father's possessions, it contained irrefutable proof. The original deeds to the Ashworth lands, stock certificates, and a sworn confession from John's grandfather, detailing how he had defrauded the Ashworth family and hidden the existence of the rightful heir, Bella. Simultaneously, Mr. Jones's investigation bore fruit. Jacob, the groom, was found living under an assumed name in a small coastal town. Terrified but consumed by guilt, he was willing to testify. He told them everything. How he had witnessed Lady Isabella tampering with the Duchess's saddle, deliberately weakening the cinch. He saw her spook the horse as Annalise mounted. He had been threatened by a man Isabella had hired, warned to disappear or his own family would be harmed. The stage was set for the final act. John announced he was hosting another grand ball, the annual Beaumont Foundation Charity Gala. It was the most important social event of the season, one the vain Lady Isabella would never dream of missing. The invitations went out, and the trap was laid. Bella stood before the mirror in her suite, a place that now truly felt like home. A seamstress had crafted a gown for her under the Duke's orders. It was a masterpiece of shimmering silver silk, cut in a style that was both elegant and commanding. Diamonds, part of the recovered Ashworth jewels, sparkled at her throat and ears. She was no longer Bella Vance, the penniless orphan. She was Bella Ashworth Vance, a woman of means and title. But looking in the mirror, she saw only the frightened girl from that first ball, her heart hammering with a mixture of terror and resolve. A soft knock came at her door. It was John. He was breathtaking in his formal black attire, but it was his eyes that held her. The storm in them had calmed, replaced by a steady, powerful light. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice soft. She nodded, unable to speak. He stepped forward and took her hand, his thumb gently stroking her knuckles. "I will be by your side the entire time," he promised. "Tonight is not about revenge. It is about justice. For Annalise. And for you." He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her skin. The gesture was more intimate, more binding than any declaration of love. In that moment, she knew she was not just his ally. She had fallen in love with the silent Duke, the man who had seen past her rags to the person she truly was. They descended the grand staircase together, just as they had weeks before. But this time the hush that fell was not of mockery, but of awe. Bella moved with a newfound confidence, her head held high. She was not a charity case. She was the mistress of her own destiny. They found Lady Isabella holding court near the champagne fountain, basking in the attention. She saw them approach, her eyes narrowing, as she took in Bella's magnificent gown and jewels. "Well, well," Isabella sneered, her voice dripping with poison. "The little mouse has found the cheese pantry, I see. You wear those jewels as if you have a right to them." "That's because she does," John said, his voice ringing out with cold authority, silencing the nearby chatter. "Allow me to reintroduce you. This is Miss Bella Ashworth Vance, the sole heir to the Ashworth estate, an estate, as you know, that my family has unjustly held in trust for some time." Isabella's face went white. She stared at Bella, then back at John, her mind scrambling. What is this nonsense? The Ashworths are nobody. They have nothing. On the contrary, John continued, his voice relentless. They have quite a bit, and they also have a witness to my wife's murder. At that moment, the ballroom doors opened, and 2 uniformed officers from Bow Street strode in, followed by a pale, trembling Jacob, the groom. He pointed a shaking finger at Isabella. "That's her!" Jacob cried, his voice cracking. "She's the one. I saw her. She killed the Duchess." Pandemonium erupted. Lady Isabella shrieked, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury and terror. "Lies! He's lying! This is a trick!" But it was too late. The evidence was irrefutable. The witness was credible, and her world was collapsing around her. As the officers took her by the arms, her facade of aristocratic grace shattered, revealing the ugly, greedy monster beneath. She lunged toward Bella, her face contorted in a mask of hate. "You! You pathetic little nobody! You ruined everything!" John moved in front of Bella, shielding her completely. "Take her away," he commanded, his voice like ice. As Lady Isabella was dragged, kicking and screaming, from the ballroom, a stunned silence fell. John turned to Bella, his expression softening as he looked down at her. He gently cupped her face, his thumbs wiping away tears she hadn't even realized she was shedding. "It's over," he said softly. In front of all of London's high society, he lowered his head and kissed her. It was not a kiss of passion, but of promise. It was a kiss of gratitude, of partnership, of a shared grief transformed into a shared future. It was the kiss of a man whose heart, once locked away in silent sorrow, had finally been set free. The whispers would surely continue, but they would be different now. They would tell the story of the penniless girl who fainted at a ball and woke up to reclaim a lost fortune, to solve a murder, and to capture the heart of the silent Duke. Bella Ashworth Vance had finally found her place, not as a guest or an employee, but as the new Duchess of Beaumont, standing beside the man who had saved her, and whom she, in turn, had saved right back. And so, Bella's story closes not with the end of a fairy tale, but with the beginning of a true and powerful legacy. It's a powerful reminder that our circumstances do not define our worth, and that courage can be found in the most unexpected places, even in a heart weakened by hunger. Bella and John's journey shows us that true love isn't about grand gestures in a glittering ballroom, but about finding the one person who sees you, who fights for you, and who helps you become the person you were always meant to be. They found justice for the past and, in doing so, built a future founded on truth, respect, and a love that was stronger than any secret. What did you think of Bella's incredible journey from despair to Duchess? If her story of resilience and love touched your heart, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this video with someone who loves a story of triumphant justice, and subscribing to the channel for more dramatic stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Thank you for listening.